Section 6 of The Coming Race. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Mary Rohde. The Coming Race by Edward George Bulwer Lytton. Chapter 10. The word Ana, pronounced broadly Ana, corresponds with our plural men. An, the singular, with man. The word for woman is Gi, pronounced hard, as in guy. It forms itself into Jaye for the plural, but the G becomes soft in the plural, like jy-ei. They have a proverb to the effect that this difference in pronunciation is symbolical, for that the female sex is soft in the concrete, but hard to deal with in the individual. The Jaye are in the fullest enjoyment of all the rights of equality with males, for which certain philosophers above ground contend. In childhood they perform the offices of work and labor impartially with the boys, and, indeed, in the earlier age appropriated to the destruction of animals irreclaimably hostile, the girls are frequently preferred, as being by constitution more ruthless under the influence of fear or hate. In the interval between infancy and the marriageable age, familiar intercourse between the sexes is suspended. At the marriageable age it is renewed, never with worse consequences than those which attend upon marriage. All arts and vocations allotted to the one sex are open to the other, and the Jaye arrogate to themselves a superiority in all those abstruse and mystical branches of reasoning for which they say the Ana are unfitted by a duller sobriety of understanding or the routine of their matter-of-fact occupations, just as young ladies in our own world constitute themselves authorities in the subtlest points of theological doctrine, for which few men, actively engaged in worldly business, have sufficient learning or refinement of intellect. Whether owing to early training in gymnastic exercises or to their constitutional organization, the Jaye are usually superior to the Ana in physical strength, an important element in the consideration and maintenance of female rights. They attain to loftier stature, and amid their rounder proportions are embedded sinews and muscles as hardy as those of the other sex. Indeed, they assert that, according to the original laws of nature, females were intended to be larger than males, and maintain this dogma by reference to the earliest formations of life in insects, and in the most ancient family of the vertebrata, namely fishes, in both of which the females are generally large enough to make a meal of their consorts if they so desire. Above all, the Jaye have a readier and more concentred power over that mysterious fluid or agency which contains the element of destruction, with a larger portion of that sagacity which comprehends dissimulation. Thus they cannot only defend themselves against all aggressions from the males, but could at any moment when he least expected his danger terminate the existence of an offending spouse. To the credit of the Jaye, no instance of their abuse of this awful superiority in the art of destruction is on record for several ages. The last that occurred in the community I speak of appears, according to their chronology, to have been about 2,000 years ago. A Gy then, in a fit of jealousy, slew her husband, and this abominable act inspired such terror among the males that they emigrated in a body and left all the Jaye to themselves. The history runs that the widowed Jaye, thus reduced to despair, fell upon the murderess when in her sleep, and therefore unarmed, and killed her, and then entered into a solemn obligation amongst themselves to abrogate forever the exercise of their extreme conjugal powers, and to inculcate the same obligation for ever and ever on their female children. By this conciliatory process, a deputation despatched to the fugitive consorts succeeded in persuading many to return, but those who did return were mostly the elder ones. The younger, either from too craven a doubt of their consorts, or too high an estimate of their own merits, rejected all overtures, and, remaining in other communities, were caught up there by other mates, with whom perhaps they were no better off. But the loss of so large a portion of the male youth operated as a salutary warning on the Gy ei, and confirmed them in the pious resolution to which they pledged themselves. Indeed, it is now popularly considered that by long hereditary disuse the Gy ei have lost both the aggressive and defensive superiority over the Ana which they once possessed. Just as in the inferior animals above earth, many peculiarities in their original formation, intended by nature for their protection, gradually fade or become inoperative when not needed under altered circumstances. I should be sorry, however, for any An who induced a Gy to make the experiment whether he or she were the stronger. From the incident I have narrated, the Ana date certain alterations in the marriage customs, tending perhaps somewhat to the advantage of the male. They now bind themselves in wedlock only for 3 years. At the end of each third year, either male or female can divorce the other, and is free to marry again. At the end of 10 years, the An has the privilege of taking a second wife, allowing the first to retire if she so please. These regulations are for the most part a dead letter. Divorces and polygamy are extremely rare, and the marriage state now seems singularly happy and serene among this astonishing people. The Gy ei, notwithstanding their boastful superiority in physical strength and intellectual abilities, being much curbed into gentle manners by the dread of separation or of a second wife, and the Ana being very much the creature of custom, and not, except under great aggravation, likely to exchange for hazardous novelties faces and manners to which they are reconciled by habit. But there is one privilege the Gy ei carefully retain, and the desire for which perhaps forms the secret motive of most lady assertors of women rights above ground. They claim the privilege, here usurped by men, of proclaiming their love and urging their suit. In other words, of being the wooing party rather than the wooed. Such a phenomenon as an old maid does not exist among the Gy ei. Indeed, it is very seldom that a Gy does not secure any An upon whom she sets her heart, if his affections be not strongly engaged elsewhere. However coy, reluctant, and prudish the male she courts may prove at first, yet her perseverance, her ardour, her persuasive powers, her command over the mystic agencies of vril, are pretty sure to run down his neck into what we call the fatal noose. Their argument for the reversal of that relationship of the sexes which the blind tyranny of man has established on the surface of the earth appears cogent, and is advanced with a frankness which might well be commended to impartial consideration. They say that of the two, the female is by nature of a more loving disposition than the male, that love occupies a larger space in her thoughts, and is more essential to her happiness, and that therefore she ought to be the wooing party. that otherwise the male is a shy and dubitant creature,